I would like to say that the present court system are finding problems in the prisons, are making mandatory improvements. And putting more money into prisons would take away money from other programs that are needed for people who are out of prison, like maybe for the elderly, for centers for the elderly, or health centers for low-income people in cities, or maybe even programs for health that help children, and daycare centers and that kind of stuff. And that the budget right now is perfect, and it's putting just enough money into prisons to make improvements that are needed. And putting any more money into it will take away from other systems that need it more. I'd also like to make a final summary. The Minnesota school director, Ron Schuster, gave a statement about the present prison system, and I quote, "In this type of program, inmates learn to live and associate with people. You begin to think as a person and not an inmate. This is a good example of what is happening in prisons today. It is quite obvious that prisoners today are treated quite justly. They are given access to more health programs than a person who is not in prison. Without much restriction and much to learn, prisoners are happier, and more eager to enter society again with a new life. Going to prison is the best thing that can happen to a criminal." Thank you.
Mr. Shuchuk has described prisons that are co-ed. There are few of these prisons in the country. He only gave one example, and most prisons contain only one sex, and most inmates are locked in cells. Ms. Rieger said that prisoners can get psychiatric help. Statistics show that there is one psychiatrist for every 4,000 prisoners. How can anyone get the help they need? Also, libraries are often inadequate or non-existent. Our worthy opponent said that prisoners can be reformed. It is shown that 80% of all crimes are committed by repeaters. This shows that these people were not properly reformed. Mr. Shuchuk said that we didn't state our plan. Our plan is to use 95% of expenditures on custody and try to improve conditions, help control corruption, and improve reform methods. We stated this in our first speech. If we do all this, we can make prisoners better places to help criminals that go in come out better people.
This is a one-on-one debate between Chrissy Harney and Jeff Schmoyer. It is about gun control.
I propose that we have stricter and more enforced regulation of gun sales and control. First, we must define what gun control means. Gun control is the regulation of a handgun, a firearm designed to be operated by one hand, otherwise known as a pistol. First, we need stricter regulations in buying a gun to curtail its use and the ease in which it may be purchased. In many cities, such as Atlanta, Georgia, and Denver, Colorado, you may walk into a store and ask to see a gun model in which you like. You pay the salesman the amount of the money the gun costs, and the gun is yours. There are no questions asked, such as if you have a criminal record, or a mental record, or what you intend to do with the gun. Any person, such as a criminal or a mentally unstable person, may purchase a gun in these cities. Such as what happened in March of 1981, when President Reagan and his surrounding aides were injured. Miraculously, no one was killed, yet the would-be assassin had a criminal and a mental record, but he was allowed to purchase a handgun. How can we, the American public, stand for this act? Opponents of gun control state that the people would not obey stricter gun control laws, but the fact is that in the city of London, there were only 2 handgun murders in 1972, while during the same period of time, Boston reported 43 murders by handguns, and London's population is 21 times greater than Boston's. Japan is another country that controls gun ownership. In 1971, just 1 person was killed by a handgun in Tokyo, but there were 308 handgun murders in Los Angeles County alone. Tokyo has a population of 11 million, while Los Angeles County has a population of only 7 million. In 1968, the Gun Control Act was passed, which stated that any law-abiding citizen, 21 years old, may buy a handgun. But this act does not state if you buy a gun from a gun shop. You may buy a gun as long as you are 21 years old, have not been convicted for a crime in which the punishment is more than 1 year in jail. Next, anyone who is a fugitive from justice cannot buy a gun. Then comes anyone who is addicted or uses narcotics or marijuana. And lastly, comes anyone who has been judged mentally defective or has been placed in a mental institution. The law states that you may purchase a gun from a friend as long as you meet the criteria for purchasing a gun. But this is where many problems start. Many people bribe their friends to sell them a gun when their friends know that they are drug addicts or mentally defective, not 21 years old, or the worst, they plan to use the gun in a crime. An English gentleman visiting the United States said, "I'd say the United States is an armed camp." This brings me to my next point. There are more than 56 million handguns in this country, contributing to more than 33,000 murders each year, while another 200,000 people are injured each year by handgun accidents. The havoc wrought by firearms is perhaps most dramatically seen in one fact alone. During the peak years of the Vietnam War, 1966 to 1972, the United States lost 43,000 men killed in combat. It was a death figure which aroused the entire nation. But in the same 7 years, we saw a far greater number of American civilians murdered by firearms. Murders with guns took 71,804 lives between 1966 and 1972. Indeed, America does seem to be an arms camp, with terrible results for thousands of its citizens each year.
First, I would like to say that nowhere has a ban on any weapon lowered the rate of violent crime. In countries such as England and Japan, there are cultural reasons behind the low rates of murder. These countries also have a lower number of rapes, thefts, and violent killings with non-firearm weapons. To further point this out, to further support this, let me point out that Switzerland requires that all able-bodied males over the age of 21 have to have an automatic weapon kept loaded in their homes at all times. Using my worthy opponent's logic, can we state that to lower the crime rate, we should give everyone automatic weapons? In New York City, there is a law that says all handguns must be licensed, and only 900 of those such licenses are issued. Yet New York has one of the highest gun per person ratios and murder rates around. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. A much more effective method of reducing the number of violent crimes seems to be the training and use of guns by civilians. Consider this. In Orlando, Florida in 1966, a program was started to train women in the use of handguns. In the following year, Orlando experienced a 90% decrease in rape, while that total was on the rise as a whole in the United States. New Orleans in 1971, pharmacists were given training in handguns with a similar program. The resulting drop in pharmacy robberies were from 3 per week to 3 in 6 months. My opponent stated that a program should be started to keep tabs on what type of people are buying guns. This would cost billions. You have to keep paperwork on every single person in the United States. Even if a law banning the ownership and manufacturing of handguns were put into actions, its effects would be minimal. The criminals will still get guns. There is already a huge black market for such guns. This would only increase. Millions of federal dollars to enforce this law are needed. Conservative estimates state that it would cost 3 times as much as the current drug war going on, and it will most likely meet with about as much success. May I leave you with this scenario. Picture yourself living in a low-income inner-city area. Trash lies strewn across the street, and danger lurks behind every corner. A violent crime is committed almost every day, and it is necessary to carry a gun for protection. But a law has been passed that makes this illegal. You realize that any mugger who, if caught, would face 20 or 30 years in prison, does not care about an extra year or so added onto his sentence for carrying a concealed handgun. But you, the law-abiding citizen, suffer for merely wishing to protect you and your family. You wonder what kind of big-shot rich liberal who is totally insensitive to your poverty-strewn life thought up this law. Surely they don't expect the police to provide protection. You wonder if these people ever think. Thank you.
My worthy opponent stated that there were cultural reasons why in Japan and Great Britain they did not have guns. Yet in Great Britain, the people are afraid of guns, so they have set up their own way of controlling guns. They just decided that no one will carry guns, and this is a law which is not passed by Parliament, it was passed by the people. And so you can see that people are afraid of handguns. My worthy opponent said that in Switzerland, people have to have guns, but he did not state the murder rate of Switzerland. Switzerland's murder rate may be 5 times America's because of these guns, but he does not state any of these reasons. Okay. New York has corruption. He says that there were only 900 handguns licensed in New York. Yet, think of how many handguns there are actually in New York. There's got to be corruption behind this because there's got to be payoffs and stuff. So there's big business in gun licensing. That's why I think that there should be more force put into gun licensing so that this corruption may not take place. He stated that in Orlando in 1966, women were given gun lessons, and there were not rapes. 90% of the rapes are gone. Yet, how many more murders took place in Orlando because women got scared with their guns, and so they shot at people and killed them for no reason. Think of these innocent people who were killed. Okay, and maybe it costs a lot of money to have gun registration, but a person's life has no price. You cannot say, oh, it costs billions for gun licensing, and it won't help that many people. But think of the families. They would pay all their money to have that person that was killed with a gun back. So you can see, money has no business in this in this fact.
This is another traditional debate. This debate is debated between Jen and Bo and John and Sue.
Euthanasia, an easy and painless death, as defined in the Webster's New World Dictionary. Hello, I'm Jennifer Thomas. My partner, Bo Hale, and myself are proposing that we definitely establish the right to die with dignity. Our first need is with the relevance of our view of death. Death for an older person, or even a younger person, should be beautiful. There's a special beauty in birth, growth, the fullness of life, and even so in the tapering off and final end. Humanists, if we get them, will see that death stays as a beautiful event. Secondly, we need a law stating, and I quote, "This act provides for the painless inducement of death for individuals who have previously executed the necessary declaration. If the individual is unable to execute the prescribed document because of mental or physical incapacity, the following, in order of priority stated, may execute the document on behalf of the patient. A, spouse. B, son or daughter 18 years old. C, parents. D, 18 years or older brother or sister. And or E, guardian." And finally, our third need has to do with what we plan on doing about the problem. Let's take a quick but final look at the religious and moral perspective. God is the source of all life and death. In the eyes of the religious, and even the not-so-religious, God is the source of all life. He is supremacy. He gives life, and he decides when to take it away. We're coming to the sad point in medical prognosis that doctors, not God, have the power over life and death.
As you may know, our subject is euthanasia. Euthanasia comes from the Greek words eu, meaning good, and thetos, meaning death. Hence, good death. But what is good death? Is euthanasia really good death? No, it is suicide or murder. Our needs for preserving a dignified death is for it to remain illegal, for it to still be considered murder, as in cases we will present, and the consideration of the individual for their opinion and their possibility of recovery. First of all, only 8 states in 25 years have chosen to make it legal to kill someone. Only 8 states. From a religious standpoint, no religion will back euthanasia, and most of them, the Christian religion being the largest, is against murder, or so-called mercy killings. Pythagoras, a famous mathematician, the creator of the Pythagorean theorem, and noted philosopher, agreed with this Christian notion that euthanasia was and is wrong. Pythagoras stated that we are, quote, the chattels of God, and without his command, we have no right to make our escape. From the view of an individual, suppose you were in a hospital. Would you want someone to pull the plug? Sure, there are living wills, but most wouldn't stand up in a court of law. And what about the possibility of recovery? Well, in one case, Mr. Barone, age 78, had massive gastrointestinal bleeding. His cause was unknown. His condition was critical. His families and doctors did everything possible to keep him alive, no matter what the pain. They decided to freeze him or do an ice lavage, which is to flush out his intestines every hour. Mr. Barone wanted to die. His families and doctors wouldn't let him. 4 days later, almost fully recovered, he didn't remember any of the pain, even being so close to death. 1 year later, he returns for a checkup, talking to a nurse who one day, a year ago, sided with him to stop his life. She stated, after Mr. Barone said how glad he is to still be alive to see his new great-grandson. I still believe that, in certain instances, people have the right to refuse heroic measures to prolong their life. But now, I also ask, who is it to define those instances? And whose job is it to make the irreversible decision? The doctor, the family, the patient, or the nurse? Thank you.
To start out, I would like to say that we need more humanists in our world to care for people, not only to prolong the act of death. Also, we'd like to stress the importance of this law. For would you rather have a non-composite court or yourself decide the fate of a member of your family? I'd like to also say 2 quotes. And one is going to have a little something before it. Modern medicine is able to prolong the life of the irreversibly unconscious, of those who are hopelessly damaged or in pain, and those whose medical situation is terminal. And the quote from Lord Ritchie Calder, medical science has prolonged the ethical crisis which transcends the conventional ideas of good and evil. Some of us prefer to use the term euthanasia to describe only the direct ending of life, not only the cessation and attempts to extend life. Thank you.
As my partner, Mr. McGuigan, has stated, we believe that euthanasia should remain illegal in this country. First, we must restate what euthanasia really is. Euthanasia is not simply allowing a terminally ill patient to die. It is the deliberate ending of a life. As Dr. Leonard J. Weber, an assistant professor in religious studies in the Religious Studies Department of Mercy College in Detroit said, mercy killing is not discontinuation of the fight to extend life in order to serve the needs of the dying patient. Rather, mercy killing is the direct ending of the life of the patient. In other words, euthanasia is directly intervening with nature, is directly taking someone else's life. In other words, murder. Euthanasia is illegal in most countries, including 84% of the United States. This is 42 out of 50 states. This is a very large percentage of America against euthanasia. Since it is illegal in all but 8 states, it is considered murder in the laws and everyone else's eyes. For example, there was a doctor named Ernst Peter Hamerly. He was the chief of medicine at Triemli Hospital in Zurich. On January 15, 1975, he was arrested and accused of murdering an unspecified number of elderly patients. There was also a man who suffered from a skull fracture. 24 hours after he received this fracture, he quit breathing and was attached to a respirator. His wife was asked later that day if the surgeons could operate on him to remove one of his kidneys for grafting into another man whose previous graft had failed. She agreed, believing that they meant that they would remove his kidney after he had died. But the next morning, they removed his kidney while he was still alive, and then they stopped the respirator. This surgeon was charged with murder. Murder has also been the charge in many other cases, as in the case of Mr. Zygmaniak. He was just 28 years old, and he was paralyzed from the neck down, and his brother came in and killed him with a sawed-off shotgun. Doesn't this prove people's view of euthanasia? Also, in many cases, there is a chance of recovery. For example, in the mid-70s at Cornell Medical Center, several doctors studied 14 patients who were all considered clinically dead. They all had special treatment and they recovered. Lev Landau, a Soviet physicist, was brought out of state of being clinically dead 4 times after an automobile accident. Imagine if this was one of your relatives, or even you. Wouldn't you want a second chance?
I'm now beginning the rebuttal section.
It's a negative block.
Excuse me.
First of all, I'd like to know what side my opponents are on. They stated that God is the only one who can take away life. But I thought they were supposed to be against that. I think they should find out what side they're on. First of all, I also like to reinforce our needs. Mr. Zymaniak, as my partner mentioned, was in a hospital. He suffered a serious, he was paralyzed from the neck down. He wanted to die. And his brother Lester, one night, went into the hospital and killed him with a sawed-off shotgun. He was charged on first-degree murder and later convicted. This also reinforces that from a legal standpoint, euthanasia is murder and shall always be considered murder if our needs are followed. Bo, I'd like to know where you got humanists. They believe in life, not death. Okay?
I'll now begin the rebuttal section. Basically what John was talking about was the consideration of the individual and suicide and murder and all the other adjectives that Mr. McGuigan used. Well, in our law it states that the person will have the right to decide by himself. But if he is not able to do so, then their family members will do that. Would you rather have a court decide, or doctors decide, or a family that you know? Wouldn't you know better about how your mother would react if she were in this situation? Wouldn't you rather choose her fate than have courts choose her fate? And I'd like to make a change that not 8 states have euthanasia. It's 10, and they are Delaware, Florida, Idaho, Maryland, Massachusetts, Montana, Oregon, Washington, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. John McGuigan brought up God. What I basically have to say about that is that the religionists and the humanists care what's best for people, whether it be life or death, what's less pain and less suffering. They look at people in a whole, whether they're alive or whether their decision would be their fate. Also, we've been debating about what euthanasia really is. Definition: 1, an easy and painless death. 2, an act or method of causing death painlessly to end suffering, advocated by some cases of incurable pain endured by diseases. We feel that the time has come, that the decision must be made, that the dying process has been tampered with long enough, and that there's nothing more that man can do. Face it, eventually we're all going to die. Would you rather suffer and then maybe live 2 years? Because no one can tell the amount of suffering that you'll go through. Okay, I look at it at John McGuigan's side. You might be killing an Einstein. But face it, if they've been in this incurable disease long enough, they're not going to have a brain to be an Einstein.
My opponent said that maybe they've been suffering for a long time, but euthanasia is not always used in such cases. Euthanasia is used in many different cases, and many times it is possible for them to recover in such cases. And many times, even if they are in a coma, they have a possibility of recovering. And maybe they don't really want to die, but you will never know, so you can't just take their life without knowing. And here's our source. This source does say that 8 states in 25 years have made euthanasia legal. And one last thing I'd like to say. The hospital bills may be high and insurance may not cover all of the expenses to keep the person alive, but he can put a price on your life.
I'd like to start with that Mr. McGuigan said that my quote was about humanists wanting death. It's not my quote. My statement was that we need more humanists to care for people, not to prolong death. Also, you can see that people don't want members of their family to have to suffer through the prolongment of life. As stated in their case for Mr. Zygmanian, whose brother killed him because he was on machines. Also, our needs, which are for humanists, a new law, and the religious aspect are justified because they are truly the needs of the ever-changing world. And our source about the 10 states was from the Death with Dignity Legislative Manual. Finally, in closing, I leave you with somewhat of a more positive outlook because maybe and hopefully a healthier attitude towards death would emerge in our culture before it is act. Also from Ecclesiastes, 3rd book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verse 2. To everything there is a season, a time to be born and a time to die. And also from one of the 10 commandments, you should love thy neighbor as thyself.
Ready?